Kyle and Rachel were always up for an adventure, especially when it came to exploring old, abandoned places. So when they heard about the forgotten train station on the outskirts of town, rumored to have been the site of a brutal train crash decades ago, they couldn't resist checking it out. Locals talked about hearing strange noises in the dead of night. Train whistles echoing through the air when no trains had run for years. The sounds of footsteps on the tracks when no one was around. And most disturbingly, sightings of shadowy figures near the platform. They drove out to the station just as the sun was setting, the fading light casting long, eerie shadows over the crumbling structure. The air was still, and there was a sense of foreboding in the air, as if something was waiting for them. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked, her voice shaky as she looked at the decaying station ahead. "I mean, this place is really old." "It's just an abandoned station," Kyle said, trying to sound confident. "We'll be fine. We'll get in, check it out, and leave." But even as he said the words, Kyle couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The station looked like something out of a nightmare. Its platforms were cracked and overgrown with weeds, the station building sagging with rot. The sign above the platform was faded, almost illegible, and the rusting tracks seemed to stretch on forever, vanishing into the trees. They stepped off the road and onto the platform, the crunch of dry leaves underfoot the only sound in the otherwise silent night. As they walked through the old ticket booth, the faint smell of must and decay filled the air. It was dark inside, the only light coming from the last rays of the sun, casting twisted shadows on the walls. The faint sound of wind howling through broken windows was the only noise until they heard it. A train whistle. Kyle froze, his heart racing. Rachel's eyes widened in horror. That wasn't you, right?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "No." Kyle breathed out, his throat dry. "That wasn't..." Before they could speak another word, the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty station. Slow, deliberate footsteps that came from the shadows near the tracks, but no one was there. Rachel's breath caught in her throat. "Did you hear that?" Kyle nodded, unable to speak. The footsteps seemed to get louder, moving toward them. They stepped back, but the noise followed. Closer and closer, the sound of boots hitting the ground, heavy, deliberate, grew louder. But when they turned the corner, there was no one there. Only the fading light and the crumbling station standing still. Rachel grabbed Kyle's arm. "We need to get out of here, right now." But just as they turned to leave, the train whistle sounded again, this time much closer, like it was right in front of them. The ground shuddered, the faint rumbling of a train moving along the tracks. Kyle's heart pounded in his chest as he looked down the tracks where he swore he saw a light moving toward them. "Is that a train?" Rachel gasped, her eyes wide in terror. The light grew brighter and closer, the unmistakable sound of a train speeding toward them, its whistle deafening. But there was no train, only an empty, rotting platform. Suddenly the light flickered out, and the tracks shuddered once more. The rumbling stopped. And then a figure appeared on the platform. It was a man, or at least it looked like a man. His clothes were tattered, covered in dust and dirt, and his face was gaunt, pale and hollow. His eyes were wide and unblinking, staring straight at them with an intensity that made their blood run cold. The man opened his mouth, but no words came out. Instead, there was only the sound of a train whistle, echoing from deep within his chest. The figure took a slow step toward them, his movements jerky and unnatural, like he was struggling to move at all. The air grew thick, and the temperature dropped. Rachel's breath came out in clouds, the cold biting at her skin. Kyle's heart raced as the figure moved closer, the sound of the whistle growing louder until it filled their ears completely. Rachel screamed, "We have to go, now!" But the figure was too close. It was right in front of them now, its eyes fixed on them. The train whistle filled their ears, drowning out everything else. Kyle grabbed Rachel's hand, pulling her toward the exit, but the air seemed to resist them, heavy and suffocating. The figure didn't move, didn't speak, it simply stared, his empty eyes boring into them. As they reached the edge of the platform, the whistle stopped, the figure vanishing into the darkness. They ran, fast. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the empty station, and the moment they reached the road, they didn't look back. They never went back to that station, ever. Over the following days, they heard whispers from the locals about the station, how sometimes at night, if you stood close enough to the tracks, you could still hear the train whistle and see the shadowy figure of the man who had died in the crash, still waiting for a train that would never come. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly lost, confused, and feeling like you were being watched? Beware. There are terrifying and mysterious beings that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Join us on TikTok and YouTube for more bone-chilling chronicles. If you dare.